Welcome to the Commercial Property Podcast. My name is Suzi Carter. I am a chartered surveyor. I've been involved in commercial property in the UK for 30 years and I've done hundreds of commercial property deals. I'm here to be your guide through the commercial property market, whether you're an experienced investor or whether you're literally thinking about dipping your toe in the world of commercial real estate. I will be here talking to you about all kinds of things commercial real estate in the UK, and I've also got some fantastic guest experts who are joining me. So please do subscribe if you'd like to follow, and if you'd like any more help or information on commercial real estate, please do click www.suzicarter.com, which is my website, and you can find out all the ways I can help you. So stay tuned for this week's episode. Welcome back. So it's my great pleasure today to introduce Ankie Bell. Ankie is one of my Commercial Property Academy clients and has been for a couple of years, and also is now on my current board. And Ankie is doing some fantastic stuff in the commercial property space. So I thought it would be great to have Ankie on to talk about what she's doing and kind of really importantly the process that Ankie's followed to get where she is, because obviously these things don't happen overnight. So, you know, if you're new to commercial, if you're a little bit stuck with commercial, if you're wondering how to find your niche, this one is definitely for you. So welcome, Ankie.
Hi, Suzi. Thank you so much for having me on and inviting me to speak to you today. It's always great to talk to you.
My pleasure. Well, it's great to have you on. So, Ankie, do you want to just do a little bit of an intro into kind of you, and also kind of your kind of what you've done in property to date, and kind of how you came to commercial property?
Okay, so so my name is Ankie Bell, and I've been in property since 2006, so for nearly 20 years. I started out the usual way, as so many property investors do, with small buy-to-lets, doing buy, refurb, refinance, building a portfolio that way. And then I moved into mini HMOs and then into larger HMOs, eventually did some commercial to residential conversions with a pub that was converted into HMOs, and also some shops that we converted to flats. And after that, moved on to serviced accommodation, and we had a large holiday-let development that basically took over my life over the COVID season, and just caused quite a lot of difficulties as a result, and really just became a job when I love finding deals and I would rather be out looking for opportunities. So as a result of having a SaaS and needing to learn how to deploy the SaaS, I then started learning about commercial property in probably around 2021, 2022. And I'd already known you, Suzi, from a course that we were on previously about 6 years ago. So it was just natural for me to look at your resources and do some of your training with the Commercial Property Academy, and learned that at that time purely just so that I could find an appropriate way to deploy the SaaS, as I said, in commercial property. But then I learned about all the incredible perks and advantages to commercial property compared to residential. I'd already had several difficult tenant situations, if you will, with some of my residential properties, and was looking for a way to diversify that. And commercial property just fit that perfectly. So much so that I've actually sold my whole buy-to-let portfolio to just completely focus on commercial property. And I'm so glad that I did.
Perfect. How's that for an endorsement? And, you know, just an interesting question that's kind of occurred to me as you're saying that, you know, what would you say to people? Because I think that there is, like you say, there's a lot of people that are now looking at commercial because they've been in the residential world. But what would you say to people who are kind of listening to this thinking residential or commercial? Like, I'm you know, maybe not got residential track record. Do you think people could go straight into commercial without having that resi track record, or do you think that was kind of like the rite of passage you almost went through?
I think for me it's the rite of passage that I went through, but I mean, they say hindsight is a great thing, but I have to tell you, if I wish I'd known about commercial property 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, rather than pursuing all the residential opportunities I did. So I think that speaks for itself, really. And I mean, in terms of being able to get finance and stuff, I think that is a stickler initially to get into the commercial world. But if you do work with a joint venture partner or a mentor or someone like that, and a really good broker, I'm sure that you can find your way into commercial, even if you don't have a residential track record.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that I've observed, is that kind of, I think that there's a bit of fear around commercial in terms of it's too complicated and stuff. But
Yeah.
and I know sitting here and others, listening to this who already invest in commercial, that actually it's a hell of a lot simpler, isn't it, in a lot of ways?
Yeah, it is. And I feel like when I started speaking about commercial to some of my property friends, many of them immediately went, "Oh no, but there are so many empty shops in my town." And it's as if all they think that commercial is retail. And as we know, there are so many different aspects and facets to commercial. Retail is one of them, and retail in some areas can be absolutely amazing, but there are so many different parts to it. Like, it's not just one particular type of investment that is commercial.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think of commercial as anything that's occupied by a business, so business tenants, then you can see how many different types of commercial there are. And we're very simple creatures as commercial people, so we like to kind of group it into retail, in office, industrial, alt sectors, hospitality. But in reality, is within each of those, there's so many different like niches and sub niches and different types of tenants that, to say that all retail is dead or all industrial is booming or whatever, you just can't make sweeping generalizations about it. So that kind of segues us as really nicely into so what I want to do through this, Ankie, is because I think that you're a great example of how somebody's kind of come in fresh and absolutely nailed their niche. And it's something that I bang on about a lot in terms of niching. Niching's so important because you're an inch wide and a mile deep. Because there are so many different types of commercial property, so many different types of businesses that are tenants, it's really challenging to be scattergun investing, because you have to learn every market and sub-market again and again and again if you're kind of investing in different towns, different strategies, different sectors. But you are a fantastic example, if you don't mind me saying, of somebody who has absolutely kind of just followed the process, the textbook process. So I'd love to kind of, if you don't mind, kind of rewind your journey a little bit. And if you could maybe just take us through a little bit of kind of, so tell us what your niche is, and then kind of some of the steps you took to kind of to get there.
Okay. So first of all, I just want to say, when I started doing the Commercial Property Academy online course, and in so many of the sessions where you're saying, nail your niche, find your niche, and I thought, what does that even actually mean? And then as you go through the course, you realize more about just honing in on a particular strategy, being so strategic about it. And that was my downfall initially. I looked at so many different properties. I looked at retail, I looked at offices, I looked at light industrial, I looked at general commercial, I looked at pubs. I was just too scattergun, as you say. And it was through that process, really, that the process of elimination then happened. So it was necessary for me to have done that, because I actually learned so much from going on all those viewings and stacking all those different opportunities. But everybody doesn't have to spend all that time to do it, But it was the process for me. But what I very quickly realized was that in our area, and by our area, I mean predominantly South Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire. But in our area, there are places where larger light industrial units are available for quite a very, very affordable entry price for that large single-let unit. But they are units that lend themselves perfectly to being split into smaller units that we then call multi-let, or the other phrase for it is CMO, which is commercial in multiple occupation. So you take a single-let larger light industrial unit and you turn it into smaller light industrial units, for which there is very big demand in this area. Those units are not being built. It's an area that is popular for its supply chain, logistics, warehousing kind of offering, but the ancillary businesses and the supply chain businesses to those large offerings have not got small units being built for them to move into. Not to mention all the other small businesses. So many businesses were started during COVID, and those occupants have now, they're ready to move from their garage or from a small lock-up storage unit or from their dining room or from their spare room. They're ready to move into their first premises. And that is the kind of tenant market that multi-let in this area is perfect for. And I found that through that process of elimination and from finding out, because this doesn't work in all areas. We've looked on the board at some areas where the entry price for a small unit is exactly the same as the entry price possibly for a larger unit. So you don't always get the uplift everywhere. But in our area, you can buy those larger single-let units for a much lower per square foot price than what the property will be valued at once you've converted it, let it, and then the per square foot price is much higher. So the uplift then warrants the refurb and also helps you with your finance afterwards.
Perfect. Great. I mean, I think you made some really important points there, I think, because I think finding your niche is a process for sure. I mean, I think once you've really got your eye into this, your reticular activating system in your brain, the one that kind of, if you buy a red car,
yes,
all they see is red car on the road.
Oh,
kind of thing.
Yeah.
that definitely starts going into overdrive, doesn't it? And I mean, I literally can't go for a day out with a family without seeing a niche now. Whereas when you start, it's actually very, very difficult. You haven't got that pair of spectacles on. So I think you're right in terms of a process that you have to go through sometimes. And I often say to clients, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. If it was easy, everyone would be nailing their niche. And absolutely, and that's why I guess you join education programs like the board and the Commercial Property Academy, because you start kind of understanding what to look for. But what was a kind of light bulb moment? Was there a conversation or a viewing or something that happened when you suddenly realised that this could work for you?
Yes, there was actually. So I went to look at a place in North Lincolnshire, and it was a place that was actually, it worked on paper as a single-let, but it was a larger single-let. But that was why I went to look at it, because I was just looking for something, particularly now because I'm speaking of looking for a purchase for the SAS. I was just looking for something that was going to offer a 10% return, on the purchase price with a tenant in. So I went to look at this property. It was about 2,500 square foot single-let property, and I spoke to the agent about it. And the uplift would have just been, or not the uplift, the return would have just been 10% on a rental, 25,000 a year. But I could see this place had 2 shutters on either side. It had other access doors. It didn't have very high ceilings. And it was just this perfect rectangle that would have just split into 4 little units. And I said to the guy, do you have a market for smaller units? And he went, yeah, we have a waiting list for smaller units because they just don't get created. And I said, and what more or less would the square foot rental price be for such smaller units? We're talking between 750 and 1,500 square foot. And he told me this per square foot rental would be about £8 a square foot. And the rental for the large unit would be about £4 a square foot. And it was just that then just clicked in my head, like, oh, okay, so you can buy it with the initial valuation of about £4 a square foot, but when you've split it up, you can rent them out at £8 a square foot, which then increases the end valuation. So it was just that one viewing, and this was the 35th property I was looking at. So this is not like my third viewing, It was, and this is now office buildings, retail, pubs. As I say, I've been to lots of them. So this was on the 35th viewing that I got that answer that day. And it was like the light bulbs just went on then. And then I started really investigating local rents, local purchase prices, per square foot purchase prices for larger units versus, so the amount of comparables and area and socioeconomics research I then started to do was extensive. But yeah, it's a model that now we're getting the valuations that are proving it. So
yeah, I mean, that is, first of all, really well done. I mean, I think yeah, I mean, it's amazing how you found that niche, and we'll talk in a minute about kind of what nailing that niche has meant for you. Because, it's one of those cases where you slow down to speed up. So, you can rush into your investing and, it's not sexy slowing down and thinking strategically, doing 35 viewings, kind of looking around all kinds of grotty kind of industrial estates and stuff. But it's sometimes it's part of the process. And you're saying like you wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but sometimes what you rule out is as important as what you rule in, and
Absolutely.
you start getting a picture. And so how important do you think relationships were in kind of forming it? Because you've gone through the process, you've looked at socioeconomics, you've looked at supply and demand, which if you had to kind of put me against the wall with a gun to my head, would be, I would say, is absolutely the number one critical factor for success in commercial is, supply and demand, and making sure that's future proofed as well. But kind of the relationships you built locally and with agents and stuff, how important do you think they have been in your success in finding your niche and then kind of carrying it on an ongoing basis?
No, that's really important, Susie. And as you say about building relationships with agents, because you can try and do so much direct to vendor sourcing and everything, which can be really successful, but I've ultimately found the best deal so far and continue to find the best deal so far through agents. And it's about that bit of inside knowledge the agents are willing to give you when you get to know them a bit better. The comparables they'll send you that they don't necessarily share with everyone, of things that are coming or things that have happened recently, that's that they just really look after me now, and they call me up. Someone called me last week with some opportunities, and some of those relationships I'm still building on and will continue to build on, but it is absolutely invaluable. And it's not just the agents, though. It's the relationships with valuation surveyors as well, who may not be from the same agency because they can't act as the valuer if they are the sales agent. So building some relationships with some other valuation agents around has been really good for me. And we've just had a third valuation from the same agent last week, the valuation that I'll talk through shortly. And then it's also having relationships with people in the local area who aren't agents and who aren't other surveyors, but just people who have an ear to the ground, people who know trades, people who just know professionals that can help you in that area. And luckily for me, I've been operating in this area for nearly 20 years, as I say. So I have built up and know quite a lot of people already who then refer me to other people now in the commercial world, because everyone's linked in one way or another sometimes, aren't they?
Yeah, no, it's very incestuous, the property world, isn't it? So, yeah, I mean, that again, textbook in terms of building relationships. And I think, I think you can do so much desktop research when you're trying to find a niche and when you're looking at investment opportunities, but ultimately getting out and in the car, looking around investment areas, looking at properties, doing viewings, building relationships.
Yeah.
That's just the work that probably 80% of people aren't willing to do, but that's the bit that gets you the results off the back end.
No, absolutely. And also, and just on that, I had a go at one of the agents the other day because he listed something that they didn't ring me about. And I said, why did you list that before you rang me? And he was like, you know what? I actually sometimes just forget. He says, I have 15 or 20 people possibly with registered requirements for something. But then when we list the deal, we're so busy that we don't always think, oh, we should go and call those people. We might send them a blanket email later on to say, these are the new listings this week, So sometimes they may not call you with an opportunity, and it's not, don't take it personal. It could just be because they're really busy. But then you can always, then when you have those great relationships, you can pick up the phone and say, well, tell me a bit more about this one, and, and follow the process from there.
Exactly. And just having a diary note in your diary just to call them bi-weekly or something.
Yeah,
if you formed enough of a relationship. And what I usually do in that circumstance is actually ask for permission, which I've never had refused yet. There's always a first time, I guess. But, like if I look at a viewing, if I do a viewing and maybe it's not for me, and say, look, would you mind if I just follow up with you every couple of weeks for similar kind of opportunities? And, no, as I say, nobody said.
That's really good. I'm going to use that one in future.
No, because I think if you've asked permission and then they don't pick up your call, like, you know, they've already given you permission for it. So
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
absolutely. No,
But
I love that. I love that.
but relationships are really key. And so, and, you know, and commercial, I think even more than resi is a relationship game, relationship
Yes.
with agents, relationship with local businesses, relationship with key local stakeholders.
Yeah.
As you say, like valuers, you know, all kinds of things. And so many deals are done off market in the commercial world.
Yeah.
If you haven't got these relationships, you're going to miss some of the best opportunities that you know the market won't know about, because these things, I mean, have often transacted off market.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's just about people knowing that you're around. You know that my second niche, which I haven't spoken about, but my second niche is retail in what do you call it again? Is it secondary
Secondary, yeah.
retail in some of the old mining town village high streets in South Yorkshire. And a guy actually rang me because we advertised a unit for sale on one of those streets. And then a guy rang me who owns a 3-unit property on that same strip. And he contacted me because of us advertising a unit for rent. And he said, well, I want to sell this. Do you know anyone who's interested in selling this? You know, so you just never know how off market units are going to come your way. And you don't know that until you are putting yourself out there.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
you know, if you've got the credibility, especially if you've done deals, I mean, that's the best way to get off market deals. But
Yeah.
if they know that, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's after speed and certainty. We as purchasers are, vendors are, agents are. And so credibility, cash purchases, you know, you can go for
Yeah.
finance later if you want to, but you know, proof of funds in cash, etc., that's going to
Absolutely.
get you through the door, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So you talked about we'll go through a couple of deals in a minute if that's all right.
Yes, of course.
But we've talked about kind of how you follow the process. And just before we kind of delve into the deals, so you said, we just for those who aren't maybe totally au fait with commercial valuation, I'll just explain something and then we'll launch into a couple of deals if that's okay. So
Yeah.
Ankie was talking about increasing the rent, which automatically increases the capital value. And so that's exactly obviously how commercial valuation works. So you know, the higher the rent you have, because everything's valued on a multiplier of the rent, the higher the rent is, the higher your capital value. So one of the low hanging fruit with commercial is to increase the rent. So that's obviously what Ankie's the big box you're ticking, isn't it?
Mhm.
But then in terms of yield, so then you apply a multiplier or a yield to a commercial yield to the rent. How are you finding yields being valued, Ankie? Kind of what kind of level are you buying at, and how are you seeing the yield change? And kind of you know, the name of the game with commercial is to bring the yield in. So buy at a higher yield, get it revalued at a lower yield when you've done your asset management, and that means that basically you've got a higher price. So kind of what kind of yield movement are you seeing on these things?
Excuse me. So we're typically looking at the units as a single let. When we're buying them with between a 10 and 12% yield. And then once we get the valuations in for post refurb, post conversion valuations when tenanted, those yields, depending on the area, are coming in at between 8.5% and 9% in South Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire, and one of them was in North East Lincolnshire as well. So that's kind of the yield compression that we are getting, and that's not based on any particular strong covenants or anything like that. So when you obviously have better covenants, you can achieve an even better yield. But that's based on that, and that is then the yield that the vacant possession calculation is done on from the valuations we've had.
Brilliant. That's a hell of a yield compression. And I presume the reason for that is because, well, obviously you're reducing the risk. So anything that reduces the risk is going to improve it. But you know, one of the perks of multi-let, as you know, is that, you know, more tenants paying the mortgage, more tenants paying the rent means that your risk is diversified across a number of tenants. So I presume that's one of the main reasons you're getting this yield compression, is it?
I believe so. I think, yeah, they definitely, when they do the little matrix, the SWOT analysis in the valuations, they do often put there that the multi-let element is an opportunity, you know.
Nice. Yeah, nice. And just Anki, if you could just maybe tell the listeners about how you find the yield, because I did a podcast episode on that last week, and I
Okay.
think there's a lot of kind of confusion about how you find yields, and how you understand what the yield's going to be, especially when you're stacking deals. So kind of when
Yeah.
you were kind of starting out, how did you kind of find, I mean, I appreciate you've had loads of valuation reports and you've got
Yes.
loads of
Yeah.
evidence now, but how did you find it when you were just kind of, how did you work out those yields when you were just starting out?
To be honest, Susie, at first I just worked everything at 10%, because that's kind of like, when I was looking at deals and I was stacking them initially, um, everything worked at 10% as a minimum. But then we would often, like I say, you'd buy a single let at a 12% yield, in this area. So I was basically working everything back to about 10% because I didn't know what the area yield was. I knew years ago from having HMO valuations, more or less for parts of this area. I knew what commercial yield they gave for HMO valuations, but I wasn't working to them because they were about 8.5%. And I just thought, no, there's no way you could achieve those values. So I was stacking things on a 10% yield. And it was only after you and I were working together more on a one-on-one basis that I had that first proper valuation for a property in North Lincolnshire. And then we could see on the valuation that the valuer had applied a 9% yield. And I remember thinking, wow, okay, this area is achieving a 9% yield. And then you can see in parts of South Yorkshire where it's an 8.5% yield, So I now know, as you say, through having valuations and through speaking to agents, when you start to build more relationship with agents, they are a bit more open in saying how they believe something will be valued or what yield will be applied based on certain factors. Because it's, as you so often say, it's an art, not a science. Like one valuer would apply certain matrices that another might not necessarily. So it's really important as well to, when you build those relationships with agents, to get an idea how the valuation agent within that particular agency would look at different factors around a property, even if they're not the one who's going to value it.
Brilliant, fantastic tips there, Anki. Yeah, I mean, yeah, if you're new to commercial, listen back to that because that is absolute gold for sure. So, yeah, give us a couple of examples. John, should we start with kind of one deal and tell us a little bit more about kind of, well, a deal of your choice and just a little bit
Okay.
about the numbers on it and how it works.
Okay. So we can start with this one that is in North Lincolnshire. So this one is a 200,000 purchase price, and it is a property that will, as a single let, it will rent for 20,000 a year. So it's one of those classic 10% yields as we buy it. And this one needs 40K spending on it because it is pretty much actually 3 separate units already. So it won't require an enormous split and conversion. So it will cost all in about 240,000. But the end GDV that has been given on this is 380,000 with rents of 36,500 a year. So it is a really good uplift, and that is a jump from 20,000 per year to 36,500 per year just from splitting. So it's nearly doubling the rent.
Nice. And how many units is that going to be
It's
split into? Three.
3 units. Yeah.
Nice. So
Yeah.
supply and demand has basically dictated that tenants who want smaller space have to pay more rent because there's less supply and they're more willing to pay that rent.
They are. And also the thing with small space lettings is that the tenants are not they don't really know about rent per square foot necessarily.
Mm.
They just want to know how much is that unit going to cost me a month. And if you say to a business owner that unit is going to cost you 850 a month or 1,000 a month or whatever it is, they then work that out and see can they afford that over a year. They don't necessarily work in the quoted rent per square foot prices. So with the small space lettings, that's kind of also how that is then calculated.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we get, as property people, we get so obsessed with like rent per square foot and analysing deals. But at the end of the day, especially small businesses, they literally do, as you say, they do not work like that. What they do is they work out all their fixed costs, their staff costs, their cost of goods, their energy costs, their business rates, maybe service charge, and then basically the rent's a residual of that, isn't it? So it's all down to affordability.
Yes, absolutely.
And so sometimes talking their language is better than trying to get too analytical with rent.
No,
So
absolutely, absolutely. And they just don't want to have to work it out that way, and there is a level that is an affordable level then within that area for small space lettings or flex space, whatever might be on offer in the area.
yeah, perfect. And so when you subdivide the units, so you don't need to go for planning. They already have doors, do they?
Yes, so we typically target units that already have shutter doors or large double doors for access, so that, because if you want to add a shutter in on a property, an external shutter, you do need planning permission for that. And we target units that can be a quick in and out with a refurb and the split on the internal side, so that we don't need to apply for planning permission. And then it's just a matter of having a building regs certificate and involving building regs in that. So this one particularly has 2 shutters already, and it has a large double door on the side where the third unit is.
Perfect. And you don't need to, so yeah, just to be clear for everyone listening, you don't need planning to subdivide a commercial unit. Usually, maybe it's a listed building or whatever, you might need to, but there's not many of those in the industrial world. Definitely not many of those. So fantastic. So what the kind of metrics on that, Ankie, in terms of kind of net rent per month, per annum, and kind of return on money out or whatever, kind of what kind of metrics have you kind of got on that particular deal?
So on that one, on the 36,500 per annum rent, after the mortgage and other costs are paid, that one will have a cash flow net profit of 12,500 a year. And it is, in terms of return on investment, well, it's actually an all money out deal, so the return on investment is infinite.
Yeah, perfect. Great. And just to be clear for everyone listening, that is obviously a net rent after the finance, but then the tenants will do all the internal repairs. So Ankie's not going to be doing any of those because of the nature of commercial leases, which is another benefit, obviously, of commercial, is that you're not having to then factor voids and maintenance and all kinds of stuff. So no, that's great deal, that one.
This episode is brought to you by Bond Finance Limited, your trusted partner for commercial property mortgage solutions. Are you an experienced residential property investor about to diversify into commercial property, looking for funding options? Bond Finance can help. Whether you're planning to expand, refinance, or make a major property investment, Bond Finance provides expert advice with access to a wide range of lenders, from high street to specialist. Book a free discovery session today to explore how we can tailor commercial funding solutions to your unique investment strategy. Visit www.bondfinanceltd.co.uk and take the next step in your commercial finance journey.
No, it really, really is a very, very good deal. Did you want me to go through another one?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay. So this is one that, well, we were celebrating because we just had this valuation through on the 6th of June. So that was quite recent. So this one is a property that is, I'm doing with one of my clients at the moment. It is a purchase price of 360,000, with fees and spend on the refurb will be a total of 120,000. So, 100,000. So it's all in £460,000. and the valuation has just come in with projected rent on the multi-let. This place is going to be 6 units. Projected rent on the multi-let of 60,000 per annum, and the valuation, the vacant possession valuation that's been given is 600,000.
Fantastic.
So yes, so that one as well is just £10,000 off of being an all money out deal, and the client is not taking finance on this anyway, so he doesn't need to have the, that's how we calculate it, don't we? Is we go and see what if you get him 75% mortgage or 70% or whatever loan to value you're targeting, how much of your money are you going to get out? But this particular client doesn't need to do that. He will just retain it until eventually, when he wants to finance it, to move on to another deal.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, that kind of deal is a great deal to have in a SAS or a pension. Or as you say, I mean, he could refinance the money out and go again. But those numbers, so 460 in, 600 end valuation, and we're still in a market where, and this is why it's important to look at kind of 2 to 5 or 2 to 7 year strategies with commercial as well, because I presume, Ankie, that's kind of today's valuation, but obviously when the market eventually does rise, which it will at some point, not only will obviously those values go up, yields will improve, rents will probably go up as well, but also valuers and lenders will instruct their valuers in a different way as well, won't they? So at the moment, everything's being done on vacant possession values, even if it's let. That they're assuming that it's not let and it's vacant because they're trying to protect the downside because we've been in a down market. But obviously that's going to change at some point. So that's almost like the base level of uplift, isn't it?
No, absolutely. And as you say, as rents increase, the valuations will increase. Every rent review, then the valuation of the property increases. But also this property has like a really large plot of land behind and next to one of the buildings, where you have pointed out as well that under permitted development, you can actually add another 1 or 2 units there. And it also has a large car park with all sorts of opportunities to put EV chargers there, because it's very close to a town centre as well. So there's a lot of additional income generating opportunities from this site. And that is just great, an excellent way of doing more asset management on it.
Perfect. Textbook. And what kind of lease lengths are you looking at there, Ankie?
3 to 5 years. They're typically 5 years with a 3-year break.
Yeah.
Normally in the area.
Yeah. Sounds great. So who would like to do deals like those? I mean, they're great deals, aren't they? What's not to like? So they're not going to win any glamour contest, but commercial isn't about. Remember, when we're trying to get value from resi, we want it to look beautiful. When we're trying to get value from commercial, we don't care really what it looks like, as long as tenants like it, do we?
Absolutely.
At the end of the
day. Yes.
And tell us a little, just to finish off on those deals, because there'll be some people listening to this going, but what about EPCs? Aren't EPCs on that kind of stock going to get really difficult and therefore they'll become obsolete? Kind of tell us a little bit about EPCs on those, Ankie.
Oh my goodness me, Suzi, as you know, I've done so much research and work and calls and meetings about the whole EPC thing for commercial. So it varies greatly between different kinds of commercial uses, but for the light industrial use class, to achieve a C EPC, it is generally quite simple. You don't need to insulate the property to the hilt, as a lot of people seem to think, because that is not a requirement. Those units are not typically insulated units. What you need to do is remove any gas appliance from the property. Anything that features gas needs to be removed, because that immediately makes the grading worse. Pardon. You want to put in energy efficient water heating for hand washing and pot washing. And then you want to put in LED lighting. And when those 3 things have been achieved, you more than likely will achieve a C rating for your EPC.
Fantastic. There we go.
It's not very costly EPC improvements.
No, busting the myths of EPCs and commercial. That's brilliant. I mean, this, I think that's great little hacks there, but also kind of makes a bit of a mockery of our EPC system, doesn't it? Let's face it. And I do think that, I mean, going to get on my soapbox for one tiny second. I do think EPCs for commercial property need to be looked at more carefully. I suspect myself that exemptions will continue as well. So I think obviously we are going to coming up to cliff edges on EPCs, but I think, busting a few myths. One, you don't need to spend a lot of money. You don't need to put loads of PV on the roof or whatever. You can actually do it relatively cheaply. And two, I think there's going to be changes to it as well. So
great.
Yeah, cool. So got a couple of questions left to ask you, Ankie. So the first one is, so Ankie recently joined the board that started in March, and had been really kind of smashing it in commercial. So why did you join the board, Ankie, and kind of what have you got out of it?
So for me, the big thing about the board, having been in other kind of mastermind programs before, is about the access and the specialist knowledge that you gain from being in the room, and just having access to you and your specialist knowledge and your expertise and support, but also from what other people are doing in the room. And what I love about the board is how collaborative it is, how everyone around the table are encouraging one another and really trying to work out help for deals with one another, the collaborations that are happening in there with investors and joint venture partners, but also just having that regular access with you, because there is nothing I can currently face that I can't then soundboard with you. And that gives me a huge amount of confidence, especially given that we're doing so many transactions for clients and also for my own portfolio, and just being able to talk through issues I come up against, questions I'm faced with, and having you just at the other side of the phone is a real comfort to me and has helped me tremendously.
Perfect. That's great. And just as a little plug before we finish up, the next board starts in September, and we'll be opening it up shortly, but we'll put the link in the show notes. So if anybody's interested, then obviously please do click the link, and I'd love to have a chat with you about it.
I just want to say, for anyone who's really interested in ramping up in commercial property, joining the board is a no-brainer, because the level of knowledge that Suzi will impart to you is just absolutely mind-boggling. But also, as I say, the support and the contact and the mentoring from Suzi on a day-to-day basis is invaluable for whatever you want to do in commercial.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you for that. But yeah, no, I'd love to talk to anybody who's interested. So thanks for that, Ankie. Now, Ankie's deals are so good, and she's nailed her niche so well that she's not only finding deals for herself, but also is doing some sourcing in the space. So Ankie, tell us a bit more about that.
That really happened from having conversations with you last summer. I think, Suzi, and I was just finding too many deals that I could go for myself. And you suggested that I looked at sourcing them on and passing them on. And as a result of that, then Commercial Property Finders was born. And yes, we work with a handful of select investors in any one season. Our next season is opening up in September, October, and we're operating a waiting list for that at the moment. And we basically just work, as I say, with a handful of investors, typically high net worth individuals from out of town, who are time poor and who really just want the whole end-to-end process taken out of their hands. And that is exactly what we do. I have a team that work with me, and we work on sourcing, viewing, negotiating, deal stacking, deal making, all the way through to completion, and then also doing the conversion or refurb if you require. And yeah, we're having great success for my clients. One of the deals I gave an example of earlier is for one of my clients. I have a few more similar to that I can share. Don't share any details, because my client's anonymity and privacy is very important, but I can tell you the numbers to do with these deals.
Amazing. Fantastic. So, Ankie, how can people get hold of you if they want to kind of talk to you, look at doing the kind of deals that you're doing?
Well, first of all, you can connect with me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn as Ankie Bell, and I'm the only Ankie Bell on there. And you can also email me at hello@commercialpropertyfinders.co.uk, or you can go to commercialpropertyfinders.co.uk and click the book a discovery call link to book a half an hour call with me. And then we can take it from there and see if our service can be a fit for you.
Perfect.
Now, also, and also just on my own deals, I am working with investors who want to come alongside and see what we do, either for themselves or just for a return. And we're also working on several different JV opportunities at the moment.
Perfect. So lots of opportunities to work with Ankie. And so definitely get in touch. We'll put all the details in the show notes as well, so that you can get in touch with Ankie. Yeah. So Ankie, thank you so much for joining me today. I mean, I think just for everyone listening, I occasionally get clients on just to talk about what they're up to, because you can hear it from me till I'm blue in the face, but ultimately kind of hearing how other people have followed the process. And I think as a coach, I work with plenty of people. There is a process to follow. And probably a lot of people don't follow that process. But when you do follow a process, and when you do kind of you keep going through it, you do get success. And I think that hopefully today's podcast has really kind of brought that home in terms of, how anybody listening to this, it doesn't have to be the niche that Ankie's in and the location that Ankie's in, but there's niches all over the country that you just need to discover basically by going through a process. And so, just to hopefully give encouragement and help to anybody thinking, gosh, all this niching business is far too complicated and far too difficult. It definitely isn't. So Ankie, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me, Susie. Great to talk to you as always. And thank you for inviting me on.
Perfect. Thanks, Ankie. And we'll catch up soon.
Take care. Thanks, Susie.